Is this the dagger?
Illegal substitution, too many men on the field, Saskatchewan.
Gizmo has a block and the sideline. He has not stepped out. He may go all the way. He needs one block and he'll do it easily.
Promise Mess I wouldn't do this.
McDavid stops up. What a move. Shoots. Scores!
Hey, everybody. Welcome to The Outsiders, powered by the Macintosh Group at RE/MAX River City. I'm Bryn Griffiths. He's Robin Brownlee. And look who's joining us. A guy who allegedly is retiring. I'm not going to fully believe that, but he has stepped away from being the voice, the play-by-play voice of the Winnipeg Jets on TSN, Dennis Beyak. Dennis, how are you?
Bryn, Robin, I am very well. Good to see you guys and good to be with you.
Okay, so let's get right to this retirement thing. I know that you're kind of doing other things. How is this going to shake down for you?
Well, there's no Tom Brady here. I'm not going to wait 2 weeks and say, nah, just kidding about all that. I'm actually going to come back for another year. But it was time. You know what? I've had such a great run, met so many good people, done so many good things. And, I turned 70 in November and, you start thinking about it then. And COVID certainly hasn't helped. The winter we had here in Winnipeg didn't help. But all those little things were just part of it. The main decision was I've always told myself that don't overstay your welcome. And you never want to get to a point where you say, I should have done this a year ago. And I just kind of felt the timing was good. And it was. I'll still keep my hand in some international hockey, but it was a great, all the way back to the Edmonton days and then to Toronto and then to Winnipeg here. The NHL part of my career was absolutely terrific.
Now, Dennis, what you just said rings some bells with me and now makes a lot of things make sense. 70. You are the youngest looking 70 I've seen in some time. And that, because Bryn and I were we're in our early 60s, and I'm trying to think, okay, Dennis has been around a long time. What I find amusing is you don't want to overstay your welcome. 70 is not 45. And I remember Rod Phillips saying the same thing, and he did it till he was 67. I mean, if you love what you're doing, which you guys clearly do, I guess time can go by pretty quickly, can it?
Well, you know what, Robin, and Rod was right. I mean, you do have fun doing what you're doing, and you don't want to overstay your welcome. But from when I get into the booth, and I'm one of those guys that likes to get there early. Like if it's a 7:00 game, I'm back at the rink by 4:00 in the afternoon, grab a quick bite, chit chat with some of the other people around there. And then usually by 4:45, I want to be in the booth. And that's where I'm most comfortable. So from that point to the end of the game, I love it. It's everything around it now. The travel isn't as easy as it used to be. As you get older, you don't sleep on the road as well as you used to anymore. And little things start to bother you a little bit more than they used to. And that's where the COVID kind of came in. So all that put together, I still enjoy what I'm doing and we'll miss that part of it. But I'm also one of those people that doesn't look back when I make a decision, and I've made lots of them. If you look at where I've been over the years, there's been lots of movement. And but once you make that decision, you kind of move forward and you kind of go from there.
Before we get to your career, you can't do this without a great teammate on the home front. And you've had a great teammate on the home front.
Well, I really have. And I'm glad that Bev was at the game on Sunday. She doesn't come to a whole lot of games. I'm really glad she was there. My niece, Shauna, was there as well. She was the one who had the waterworks going absolutely throughout the game. But you know what? Bev and I have been together for over 43 years. And I've moved her around from Saskatoon to Seattle to Toronto, Edmonton to Toronto, back to Winnipeg here. And I just go off and do what I need to do. And she's the one that stays behind and does all the other stuff. So I'm really glad that she was there on Sunday to be part of it. And I'm really glad what TSN did. They made her part of the telecast. as did the Winnipeg Jets in-house. I said this the other day, and I'll say it again. I don't know if you had one of the best script writers in Hollywood. I don't know if you could have written a better script than what went down on Sunday. Going all the way back to, I spent 4 years in Seattle. The Seattle Kraken game got postponed because of snow. So all of a sudden that became the last NHL game that I was going to do. So that was part of it, to the Jets having me read the starting lineup in the dressing room, to the acknowledgement in the building. You never really know what you're going to expect, to the comeback win, everything, to allowing me to give my final message. I didn't know it was going to go in-house. It did. And that. So the day was absolutely perfect.
I was kind of fascinated by the fact that you got a chance to go back in and do a game out of Seattle in a barn that you're quite familiar with. It was kind of fun to watch that broadcast. For you, you seem to be pretty charged up about it, but did they catch you a little bit off guard with that one?
They did. I mean, you know what? Right when Seattle came in, and I don't know how serious I was about calling it at the end of last year a career, because of the fact we didn't travel last year. I didn't want to make a decision based on that, because it was not a fun year last year doing games off monitor. That's not what we sign up for.
Yeah.
And so when Seattle came in, that was part of it. I said, hey, I want to, get a game in Seattle. And unfortunately it was a back-to-back. So we really didn't have a whole lot of time in Seattle. But the part that our producer, Kevin Pratt and Kevin Sawyer, along, I find out later, with my wife, Bev, who provided them with some photos and that sort of thing. I did not know that little tribute to me in my Seattle days was coming. So, I'm not big on surprises. And all I kept hearing in Sunday's broadcast from the producer was, okay, coming out of break, we got a surprise. Coming out of break, we got a surprise. So I didn't know what we were doing, but I had enough trust in him that I knew it was going to be okay.
Dennis, Bryn touched on it, and what we want to know, and I think what a lot of people want to know, is just walk us through, at least briefly, the career in terms of your stops. You said you made a lot of stops, and I was looking up and I saw Flin Flon, and I'm thinking, what the heck, and when was that? And was it really like 1970, or when did you start that gig?
Yeah, it was, until I told you I was 70. I could have told you that I was 12 when I started at CFAR, but that wasn't the case. Bobby Clark and Reggie Leach had just left, and that was my first job in radio.
My goodness.
And when I got there, you guys know small town radio, and you do everything. I mean, Bryn, you did it in Moose Jaw and other places. You do whatever is necessary to get your foot in the door and get this career started. So when I actually got to Flin Flon, the newspaper guy was doing the play-by-play. And then he fell ill one day, and I got the opportunity, and that opened the door for me. And that's something that I always wanted to do. You did it as a kid playing ball hockey. And, so that kind of got Flin Flon started. Patty Ginnell was in Flin Flon at the time. I left after 2 years there. I got an opportunity to go to Saskatoon to CFQC Radio and Television. In the meantime, Patty Ginnell bought the Victoria Cougars. So after a couple of years in Saskatoon, he said, would you come to Victoria? I went to Victoria for a couple of years. Patty was then selling the team. I was back in Saskatoon on my way back to Manitoba to my brother's wedding. The day an opening came up at CFQC to be the sports editor or sports director. I took that opportunity, and then there was a change in Saskatoon. Darryl Lubenicki came in and took over with the Blades from Jackie McLeod. And Darryl Lubenicki on a road trip, we were walking on the West Coast. It was a rainy day, an off day. He said, would you come work for me? And he said, this is too much for me to do by myself. So that's when I left broadcasting with CFQC. I went to work for the Saskatoon Blades. I stayed out of broadcasting until 1988, when they were opening up Sask Place. And people in Saskatoon wanted to do the game. And our people, Darryl Lubenicki, said, you can do the game, but Dennis Beyak has to call the game, and you're going to pay him $500. Which I thought was pretty good money. And so that was the start of getting back into broadcasting. So I worked for the team, but I did the play-by-play on radio. And then the Memorial Cup rolled along, and that is the one event that was a springboard for my career. It was the '89 Memorial Cup in Saskatoon. I was chairman of the event. I emceed the banquet. I emceed the awards presentation, and it kind of went from there. And then when Seattle was getting the Memorial Cup, the Thunderbirds came calling and said, "Hey, would you come to Seattle?" I went to Seattle. We had the Memorial Cup. Peter Anholt left after that. They offered me the general manager's job. I took it. I did that for a couple of years. Long story as to what happened there. I got an opportunity to go to Tri-Cities. Went there for 1 year. Got fired despite the fact we had a very, very good year. Long story. You'll have to wait for the book on that one. And which there won't be a book. And then it was then that I got the call from Edmonton from a friend of mine that said, would you get back into broadcasting? And I said, I'm unemployed. I get back into anything. And they said, the Oilers are looking for somebody. This was Colin Bauer and his parents, who Colin lived with Bev and I in Saskatoon when he played for the Blades.
Yeah.
And so that's where the whole Edmonton thing started. And that was my first NHL full-time gig. CFRN lost the rights. After a couple of years, I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I got a call from Molestar in Toronto and said, would you come and do Toronto radio? I went there for 14 years, 13 seasons. We missed one with the lockout. And then summer of 2011, I got a call from TSN, said, if we get the Winnipeg Jets rights, would you move to Winnipeg? And I said, in a heartbeat. So there's the short version of my career. And I've loved absolutely every minute of it. Being part of the Western Hockey League will always be near and dear to my heart. It's a terrific league. The knowing that if something isn't going good, it's kind of up to you to fix it. If it is going good, you know you've been part of a team that has put something good together here. And the adrenaline rushes of day to day and everything else that goes along with it, that was very special.
Well, we go back a long way to the Western Hockey League, and somebody was asking me what kind of memories.
The Mickey Mouse days.
Yes, the Mickey Mouse days. That one isn't on me. That was on Kevin Gallant.
Oh, that's right. Yes,
I'm the guy who ordered the pizza halfway through the game.
That's right. Yes, I remember that.
That you were not a big fan of. You even told me the following night in Saskatoon. Roger Millions even. Roger had warned me that you were coming after me that night. But the funny one for me, though, is and it's funny how the toughest things stand out, and that was the arrival of the Saskatoon team bus into Moose Jaw the day of the Swift Current Bronco crash. And I basically held the bus up, and you, Daryl, and Roger Million stepped off the bus, and I had to tell you what happened. Probably one of the toughest things I've ever had to do. And I still can't believe we played, Dennis. That was such a tough emotional day.
It was. And I remember you being there. And the minute I saw you there, you immediately think, okay, something's up here. But we thought, okay, there's something wrong with the building. Something's wrong with the team. The game's not going to happen. And not for 1 second did we ever think that it was going to be that. And I remember that because, Bev was working in the media at that time. And a news bulletin came on and said a Western Hockey League bus has been in an accident.
Yeah.
And she knew we were on our way to Moose Jaw.
Yeah.
And so for a couple of seconds there, all sorts of things are going through her head. And then, of course, just the tragic events of what happened there.
And that was before this device here that would have told you well before I had to do it.
Yeah.
Well, we had, Brent, I've told this before, the Kamloops Blazers had traded Peter Soberlack out east, and Peter's father, and Peter, of course, was a draft pick of the Edmonton Oilers. Peter's father, John, was a lawyer in Kamloops, and without the cell, he was calling the Kamloops, us at the Kamloops Daily News virtually, I don't know, every 20 minutes, every half hour to see if we had an update. That was agonizing for him because when your son's on a bus and you're not getting ready information, like everything now is so minute by minute. Back then, it was a totally different time and a scary time, wasn't it?
Well, but you know what it was for a lot of those reasons, what you guys just talked about, but in a positive way. And maybe that's why I got to like the bus as much as I did. I enjoyed the bus travel because when you got on that bus nobody could bother you for the next how many ever hours you were going to be on that bus.
Yeah.
You know, if it was the Moose Jaw from Saskatoon, it was 2:15. If it was Regina, it was 2.5. Then, you know, even later when I got into Seattle and Tri-Cities, I mean, they were just starting to, I mean, the first cell phone we had in Seattle was like a brick. And, you know, so they weren't, everybody didn't have one, but so there was peace and quiet on the bus. You could get caught up on some things. You could do some reading. I always napped very good on the bus and that, but times have changed, no doubt about that.
Wanted to ask you too, you touched on it. The charm of, I guess as you get older, it changes. But I remember being thrilled getting on the bus. You know, Guy, you'd know well, you know, Kelly Moore was doing the play-by-play for the Blazers then. You know, Hitch was up front, and the newspaper guys, we didn't travel every road trip, but we would go, and then playoffs come, we would go. There's a certain charm there to, at least when you're a young reporter or a young broadcaster, the guys pulling out the foamies and people laying across the seats. And you did that for a long time. Talk about the charm of that part of it, the travel, the camaraderie, and you're insulated as a little group on that bus.
Well, I'll start off with Kelly Moore, and obviously he's in Winnipeg now, so we reconnected, and we had many great chats at the rink watching a practice or a morning skate about the days in the Western Hockey League. And I would go back to Flin Flon, keeping in mind where Flin Flon is and where Victoria is. And we would have road trips that would go for like 24, 25 days. I remember in one of my first years in Flin Flon, we were gone basically the entire month of November. And we played everybody along the way. I think it was like 17 games in 24 days.
Wow.
Or something to that effect. So you had to get used to the bus, or else the job just was going to be no fun whatsoever. And I remember the days in Saskatoon, and we used to laugh about this. I had this green blanket, and it was just a green blanket. That's all it was. But it was like it was soundproof. And the guys would be playing cards, and the guys would be laughing and joking, on the way back to Saskatoon after a big win someplace. And I would just put this green blanket over my head, and it was like it was soundproof. And I remember the days when we were in Saskatoon, we'd come back from Brandon after a game, and we'd get back to Saskatoon like at 5:36 in the morning. And I was actually upset that we were home because I was sleeping so good on the bus, and you just get used to it. You cross feet with whoever's across the aisle from you, and you learn to coexist. And but those, so many good stories from the bus, and you guys know them, and those are the days that that made all of this fun. Especially, we all started in this business as young guys, and we love the game of hockey, or else we wouldn't be doing what we're doing.
I couldn't stay awake on the bus. I don't know why. Like, I would be out like a light the moment the bus pulled out until it pulled into the arena. I don't know why it was like that, Dennis, but there was a comfort factor on that bus. We can talk all we want about the games, but that was just your zone. That was your happy zone with the players. Yeah. And you're right. Everybody kind of just got along. It was, to me, that's the most memorable part for me of the Western Hockey League. We can talk about individual games and things like that, but the bus trips, wow.
And you know what, you mentioned this a little while ago. It's amazing that there wasn't, and thankfully, that there were more, bus accidents that the Swifter and Broncos had to go through, and that. I mean, we all heard stories of the bus running off the road in a snowstorm, or trying to dodge an animal, or whatever the case was. But I mean, it's a credit to the bus drivers and the organizations to put as many miles on as we have. And you felt, you know what? I just always felt comfortable on the bus. I never once worried about anything. I felt very safe, felt very comfortable, and we've all put a lot of miles on the bus.
So you get to the bigs. Do you have another question there, Robin, on the dub or anything before we get to the NHL stuff?
Well, no, not really. I just looking at the places where Dennis was. Flin Flon is a specific market. But the other ones are fairly substantial cities. You know, there's this prairie charm about major junior hockey where it's the big game in town, but that's not really true with Dennis. When you're in Seattle, that's a major league city. Tri-Cities is just getting started. I remember because it was our beloved New Westminster Bruins who left. Stu Barnes was on the New Westminster team that went down to Tri-Cities right away. But I would ask this: did you have a favorite stop in that group, Dennis? Because they were distinctly different markets, really.
Yeah, Saskatoon, I think, will always be special to me. The Memorial Cup, I got married in Saskatoon. I had so many good friends there. I played ball in Saskatoon. I played old-timer rec hockey in Saskatoon. It was just such a great city. And as I mentioned before, the Memorial Cup in '89 was really the springboard. All the NHL teams at that time still came to the Memorial Cup en masse. They'd have 8, 10 scouts there. So you really did get to know everybody. And then you go to Seattle and go ahead, Robin.
No, you just reminded me with the talk about Sask Place. I remember going to cover the World Junior Championship there. The building would have only been
very cold.
Yes.
Very cold.
Oh, it was brutal cold. I remember Frank Orr would get on that media bus, and Frank wasn't a young man then, and he looked terrible. But I remember thinking, and this was up for grabs for a while. You know this, Dennis. I'm thinking this is a hell of a building. Now, by today's standards, no. But by the standards of buildings then, it was pretty good. And there was the thought, could Saskatoon get a team? And I always thought that would be terrific. I don't know if it would ever work. Did you ever get caught up in that thought, Dennis, that maybe Saskatoon under the old NHL could be an NHL market?
Well, when we opened that building, it was interesting. We added seats. I think we had 11,400 and some for our opening game. And I remember I looked at the NHL stats the next morning, and I think we had outdrawn like 4 or 5 NHL teams.
Yeah.
So certainly the thought process was there. And Bill Hunter, who your market knows very, very well, in fact, entire Western Canada knows Bill Hunter, worked so hard to try and get an NHL team there. To be honest, I was with the Blades at that time, and we never got caught up in the hype because we just didn't see it happening. And not that the fan support wasn't there, but we had a pretty good idea of what NHL budgets were, what it cost to run an NHL team.
Yeah.
We knew the business people in Saskatoon, and I just couldn't see there being enough business support. I think the fan support would have been there initially, because I do believe people would have traveled from Bigger and from Kindersley and from Allen and from Rosetown and all those other places, Prince Albert, to come and watch NHL teams initially. Eventually, I think that would have worn off a little bit, but I just don't think that there was the dollars from the business side of it to make an NHL team operate in Saskatoon. And we never really did get caught up on the hype. It just was, there was too many outlying effects that I'm not sure we're ever going to get solved. And I think eventually that's really did what happened there. Is the NHL at the meeting said, this team loses $5 million in year one. Who's picking up the tab? Where's the tab coming from?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure there was an honest answer for that question. And as a result, it just kind of went by the wayside. But it was exciting. I mean, it had to be the fact that, maybe an NHL team was going to end up in Saskatchewan, but realistically, it was a long shot.
I'm going to take a little side street here for a second because you brought up the name. One of the highlights for me when I worked with the Edmonton Oilers was that my office was right next door to Bill Hunter's office when Bill was coming in and just doing some stuff with the hockey club to kind of keep busy. And if it was getting a little tiresome or I needed a bit of a break, I would just knock on the door next door and he would come on in. And he would tell about 9 or 10, maybe 12 stories in the span of about 20 minutes. And it just would jack me right up to get back to work. But I mean, we want to talk about one of those colorful characters in the world of sports, let alone hockey. Bill Hunter was one of those guys, Dennis.
Oh, really was. And you know what? I was, we were moving some stuff around here the other day, and I was getting some stuff off the bookshelf and trying to realizing it needed dusting. And I came across his book that I've read a couple of times. And but yeah, just one of those characters. I mean, you go back to the early days in the Western Hockey League. Ernie McLean, Patty Ginnell, Ben Hatskin, Scotty Monroe, Bill Hunter. I mean, they were classic, just such legendary people and such storytellers. And Bill was as good as anybody at telling those stories. But guys that just they loved the game of hockey. I remember as a young lad when I first got into the league, going to some of the league meetings, and you were just in awe of these people. Watch them go back and forth over this and back and forth over that, and and that, hey, what the Western Hockey League is today, a lot is owed to those people.
Well, and with all due respect to all of those guys, though, and I still remember the Western Hockey League was holding its All-Star game in Regina, and Punch got up there, Ernie McLean got up there to tell the story about how he lost his eye. And I remember turning to Ed Chenoweth, who was standing next to me, and Ed looked at me and said, I can hardly wait to hear how this story evolves this time, because there was always a new twist or something a little bit different on it. But that was the charm of being around those guys, is that they had great stories, and they always were a little bit different the second time or the third time or the fourth time or the 10th time you heard it.
Yeah, at that All-Star game in Regina, we were in the hospitality room in the afternoon.
Yes.
And Ernie got telling the story. And you could have heard a pin drop for probably 45 minutes to an hour as Ernie told this story about the plane crash and thinking that he was never going to make it out alive, and waking up one morning and seeing the smoke from a chimney. And he knew then he was near somebody, and made his way and yeah. But again, one of those stories that those guys can tell, and they had to spell them.
Well, it's funny with McLean. I mean, Punch McLean was at GM Place telling the same stories, in the Canucks new rink, as he'd been telling at times. That they had a tiny little scouting room about as big as a closet in Queen's Park Arena. And you'd have guys like, Dennis, you'd remember these guys, like Babe Pratt of the Vancouver Canucks, and all the scouts in there shooting the breeze, and the stories you'd tell. And I've got like a student press pass to go to these games. I'm thinking, holy smokes, these guys are awesome. I see these guys on TV after the Canucks got into the league. There were a lot of characters in the game over the years. Hunter's one of them for sure in Edmonton, but every town had some of them, didn't they?
Well, they did. And whether it was the fans, whether it was the, somebody that was involved with the team, that was the heartbeat of those towns. And everybody knew when the game was, everybody knew what the schedule was. And little by little, some of that started to fade away. But those are the people that made the Western Hockey League what it is today. I mean, the Ed Chenoweths, when he took over, I always said about Ed Chenoweth, he had this unbelievable ability. And I think Gary Bettman probably has this too. Ed Chenoweth had the owners in the Western Hockey League convinced that they worked for him.
That's true.
And that maybe is the best compliment you could give to anybody in that position. And but again, took the Western Hockey League from what it was back then to what it is today, where franchises are selling for $9, $10, $11 million.
Hey, before we start talking about the NHL and your time in the league, I was approached by somebody last week after your announcement, and they said, how would you sum up Dennis? I went, well, we could talk about talented. We could talk about the fact that you're a great play-by-play guy, that you did a great job behind the scenes at the general manager level and at every level. But the one word that keeps coming out to me is the word connected. You are so connected to everybody in hockey. And if you didn't have an answer to anything, you could pick up the phone, and I've seen you do it. You could pick up the phone, call somebody, and have an answer in about 30 seconds. Is connected a good word? And I hope you'll take that as the ultimate compliment coming from me.
Well, thank you. Yes, and I've stayed connected with a lot of people because I think that's important. I've seen people who have moved on into retirement and all of a sudden find themselves very lonely.
Yeah,
and I want to make sure that that doesn't happen to me. I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't be able to touch base, especially in today's world where it's so easy to touch base with somebody. I mean, 5 years ago, if you'd have said we'd be doing this with cameras versus over the telephone,
yeah,
I believed it. And that's what it is. So it is much easier to kind of stay in touch with people. I believe it was in Edmonton, and you might have been there at the draft when I think it was Speck came up with the King of Kensington. Might have been Morley Scott too, because every time we turned a corner, we ran into somebody else that I knew, and we'd stop and have this brief conversation. And that's kind of where some of that got going. But you know what? We meet so many good people along the way. And when all is said and done, what we do is fun and pays the bills, and we enjoy it immensely. But it's the people that we meet along the way that we can never forget. And, you know, I mean, talking to you guys now, I mean, brings me all the way back to, in Bryn's case, all the way back to the days of Saskatoon and Moose Jaw, and Rob, in your case, all the way back to my days in Edmonton when I got into the National Hockey League. So, you know, I follow on Twitter. I don't tweet. I follow you guys. I follow lots of people, and it's nice to reconnect.
Okay, let's get into the NHL stuff. So you spend your time in the markets that you went into. Let's go to the Edmonton time. What do you remember the most about that?
Well, I guess getting the job first.
Okay.
You know, that would, you know, I bothered poor Fred Philthott till I thought he was going to get mad at me and never speak to me again. But I had been let go in Tri-Cities. So I was going to the draft anyway, because we had a number of guys. Damon Lankow went, Terry Ryan went, Brian Boucher went. So I was going to the draft anyway. And that's where the whole thing kind of started about Edmonton and the Oilers looking for somebody to come in and do some play-by-play. And I got a hold of Stu McDonald, who I knew from the Regina days when he was with the Pats. And he directed me on to Fred Philthott, and that's where that whole thing got started. And I kicked the crap out of the audition when they flew me in for it. I didn't think I'd ever get the job, but I did. One of the early games, I remember calling Sergei Kravakrisov. I remember that very well. But just, you're in the National Hockey League, and the Oilers treated us very well. CFRN treated me very, very well. And that's, as a kid, you dreamt about doing play-by-play in the NHL. And for a farm kid from Manitoba, it had happened. And come full circle, whatever you want. And I was in the NHL, and just, we had a good group there. Everybody got along so well, Maddie and Speck and you guys. And you know, we all realized we had a job to do, and it was different then. I mean, we could walk into the dressing room before practice and talk to players if we wanted to. And that doesn't happen now because there's just too many people around. But I don't think you ever forget, you know, whether it be your first job in the NHL, and you know, certainly a special time for me. And I really enjoyed the 2 years that I was there. Saw lots of good players go through: Doug Waite, Jason Arnott, and you know, and again, I'd spent so many years in junior, and that's what I said when I got lucky enough to introduce the Jets roster here the other day. Is when you're around the Western Hockey League, you see young guys come in and become men. And that's kind of what it is in the NHL. I saw all those young guys come in, and then just to see how they developed into the people and the players that they became was, you know, was something that you admired and certainly kept track of.
And from a media guy point of view, Dennis, it was a different time. I got here in time for the 90 Stanley Cup win. Came in 89. But the dynasty days were essentially over, and most of the biggest names were gone or were on the way out because the team was being sold off piece by piece at that point. A different time, but it was a fun time because you mentioned a guy like Doug Waite. I came into that room thinking, well, all the Gretzky's gone, so and some Messier was still there, but a different team in a different era in Edmonton, wasn't it?
It was, and I got there for the post-Messier days as well. In fact, I was at CFRN, and we got a call from somebody in Vancouver and wanted me to pay for a tip. And I said, hey, I have no authority to pay for a tip, whatever. And the guy finally said, well, I'll tell you anyway. Mark Messier just got off a plane in Vancouver, and he is signing with the Vancouver Canucks. And so now I'm like maybe 2 hours before we go on the air. So I'm debating, okay, do I believe this guy? Do I not believe this guy? And so I called Glenn Sather, and Sather said, give me a couple minutes, called me back and said, yep, it's happening. So we went on at 6 o'clock and said, Mark Messier signing with the Vancouver Canucks. But you know what? There were still lots of characters there. I mean, Kelly Bookberger, salt of the earth guy, and guys that we mentioned. Ryan Smith was a pleasure to watch. You want to talk about the post Glenn Anderson era with guys going to the net, and Glenn was there for a little while when I was there. So, and again, Ron Lowe, just such a terrific individual, and Curtis Joseph came from Toronto, and you know, all those little things that you know, that you knew, and or went the other way, went to Toronto from Edmonton, but you know, all those little things that you remember, and everything else along the way, but it's again, it's the people that you know, Kevin Lowe, and you know, that whole group. That they were, you know, we were traveling commercial initially. This is before the charter days, so you spend a lot of time in airports, the Salt Lake City for a lot of them. So you spend a lot of time in airports, and you spend a lot more time around the players than you do now.
Evolution, transition. You go and you're doing radio play-by-play, then you go to television, you go back to radio, go back to television. Tell me which you prefer. Let me just set this up. I remember hearing Bob Costas talk about where his true love was, and he said it was in radio. And the reason why he said he preferred radio over television was that he was asked to paint the entire canvas, whereas in television, he just needed to put a really good, solid caption with the pictures. What about you?
I love radio. And I wish, and I say this in all sincerity, understanding the way the industry is now, I wish radio paid better. I wish radio, and it's getting into television now too, I wish there was a little more loyalty, but that's not the way business is these days, and it's certainly gone from radio into television as well. But I do love radio. I grew up listening to hockey on radio, and for the very same reasons that you just mentioned there. You are 100% in charge of a radio broadcast. Television, you've got replays, you've got producers in your ear, you've got an analyst with you that needs to get some replays in and tell you why things happened. Radio was totally different. And I love radio to death, but television paid better.
Yeah.
And but once you get into television too, you understand it's a different market, and your job is a little bit different. And I mean, I certainly enjoyed every second of. You have to be, you know, maybe a little bit more careful with identification of players and that, because people can see what you're seeing. But still, that's a minor thing. It's still play-by-play, and you're still, you know, you're still painting a picture. You're maybe describing the picture a little bit more than painting it, but it's still being, you know, part of what people want to hear and what people want to see.
Dennis, I can honestly say, and we haven't asked this question yet, I love your call of games. I honestly do. I used to, partially because of where I grew up, I used to love Jim Robson's call of the Vancouver Canucks. And you know what? Now Jack Michael's here in Edmonton, having to follow in the shoes of Rod Phillips. He's got his own style and his own audience now. As a young man listening, or even once you got into the business, was there anybody that influenced you that you thought, man, this guy's really good?
I don't know if I followed, tried to copy anybody. I don't think. I kind of created my own. And obviously, I grew up with Foster Hewitt. I grew up with Gallivan, Bill Hewitt, not Foster as much. He was near the end of his a little bit. And then, of course, Bob Cole, who I still think in his heyday was the best there ever was as far as calling a hockey game. But certainly Danny Gallivan brought this excitement. I think the thing you learned from those people was follow the play up the ice, like the Danny Gallivans, the Dan Kellys, and there's other, the Bob Coles. As the play goes up, their level goes up as the play is coming across the blue line, across the red line, across the offensive blue line. And now you build it up. There's a good chance something is going to happen here. But I really think, those were the guys that were in the back of my head. So maybe I did copy them more than I know. But a lot of what I did was calling ball hockey games with my brother and I. And we play ball hockey for hours on the farm. And I was the goaltender and the play-by-play guy. I should have stayed, and he would have paid more. But that's kind of where it all got going. And but I think all those guys are in your head because that's what you grew up with. I mean, when you whether it's a Danny Gallivan, when cannonading shot that mesmerized the goaltender and
scintillating.
Scintillating. I remember one of Danny Gallivan's stories was he got a letter from a professor that said, "Dear Mr. Gallivan, there's no such word as cannonading." He sent back, "Dear Professor," whatever the guy's name was, "there is now. Thanks for watching, listening." And that. So everybody has their own style. I think we develop a style. Over the years, I've never planned to say bang bang or some of the other little sayings that I have. Johnny Cash he walks the line like Johnny Cash, or round puck, round post, hit it square. You don't plan those.
That's you.
They just happen. Because I've got a bunch of other ones that I always keep saying, geez, I've got to get this in. I got to get this in. But you never get them in because the timing isn't right. So you don't force them in. You have to wait for the timing to be right, and out they come.
It's funny. I hadn't seen you for a bunch of years, and then I saw you 2 years ago at the World Juniors, but I didn't see you close. You were in Trinich in the Czech Republic, and I was in the crowd on the other side, and we were texting back and forth, and I was laughing. You and Craig Button were in the press box, and that's as close as we'd gone all this way from Canada to the Czech Republic, and that was as close as I could get to you. And then I hadn't seen or talked to you for a while. It's amazing how you get this bond, and you can go a couple of years, and a lot can happen in a couple of years, trust me. But yet, when you make a phone call, it's just like it was yesterday, right?
It is. And that's back to where we talked about a few minutes ago about staying connected with people. And we create friendships that we need to hold on to. I'm a firm believer in that. And you've gone through some very tough times, Brent. And when I saw you right now, it just brought a smile on my face because I know what you've gone through. And to see you now back doing what you love to do, words can't really describe that.
Just 100 pounds less, which is actually a great thing.
Yeah, well, I know that's a tough way to do it.
I wouldn't recommend it for anybody. But, the one thing that I'm very excited about is I'm going to have a chance to get on the golf course for the first time in 3.5-4 years. You love golf. How are you going to spend this alleged retirement here when you're not at the World Hockey Championship overseas?
Well, what's interesting is somebody said to me this morning, has it sunk in yet? And I said, no, because nothing's changed. The season came to an end. I'm getting ready for World Championship, just as I have for the last number of years. We leave for Finland tomorrow morning. I'll come back from there. It'll be summertime. And I'll do the World Junior in Edmonton in August.
Right.
And come September is when it'll kind of hit home that I'm not heading to training camp. And in the meantime, we're going to, probably sell our place here in Winnipeg and those sorts of things. But yeah, nothing really has changed from that standpoint. You kind of trudge along, but it'll kind of come to me in September when training camp is getting going and I'm sitting at home golfing. But I do love the game. I love to fish. There's a bunch of us that for the last couple of years, Darryl Lubinecki being one of them, name you guys will know. We used to go up to northern Saskatchewan fishing. Dave Chartier, who played for the Saskatoon Blades, him and some people have a place up at Clam Lake. And 2 years ago, we couldn't go because of COVID. Last year, we didn't go because the day before we were supposed to go, there was a fire up at L'Orange. The highway was closed. We couldn't get up there, so we had to cancel it. So it's been 2 summers without a fishing trip. But Barry Thompson, who spent many years with Molson's in Saskatoon and Saskatchewan, is part of that as well. And looking forward to that. We're going to do that. Hopefully this summer. We're all getting older. We don't know how many more fishing trips we have, but I do love golf. Bev golfs, and I think that's been great for both of us because it's something that we can do together. She doesn't golf as much as I do, but I've always said a good group of people on a good golf course on a nice day is so rewarding and refreshing for the soul that I hope I can keep playing for a number of years.
There's really no such thing as a bad day on the golf course.
No.
Come on. Now, you can go a lot of places, Dennis, where the golf season is longer than where you are now. So do you keep a home base and maybe strike out with a summer place somewhere? Or do you move? What do you foresee down the road? Because if you want to golf, there's lots of nice places to go.
Well, we have a place in Kelowna, so that's kind of going to become home base. We've had a place since 1998 where we spend the summers. So we'll be spending a little bit more time there. Do have a place in Arizona that we've never, ever stayed in. It's been ever since we purchased it back in 2008. So we're trying to figure out what we want to do with that. I won't get political here, but the U.S. political climate is something that I maybe put too much stock in.
Right.
But yeah, that's part of it too. We do look to spend. I talked about the long, cold winter here in Winnipeg, and for the last number of years, when Bev and I were both working, we both worked hard so that our plan was that we wouldn't have to spend winter in minus 40. And before I get too old for us to do that, that was kind of part of the decision as well, that take that next step and do some of the things that you've been looking at doing for the last number of years.
Well, you're already set up then. Have you had some tee times out? Cam Cole is retired there. He's a guy you'd know from Edmonton and Toronto, and he's got his home course there. Have you had a round with him?
I haven't because sometimes I don't spend as much time in Kelowna in the summertime as I would like to, but I know he's up at, I'm trying to remember what course he's up at because I know where he is. Yeah. And certainly I'm hoping that with spending a little bit more time, Jim Houston spends some time up there. There's a number of people that come up to Kelowna for the summertime. And, hopefully now that we're there a little bit longer, I do want to connect with those people because number one, I'll be looking for golf games. And number two, to tell some old war stories. And certainly as part of that from my days in Edmonton.
Hey, thanks for your time today. This has been exceptional. It's not going to come as a surprise to any of us. This was a blast, and we'll have plenty to talk about, and we'll continue to track you down and talk a lot about hockey. Are you enjoying the playoffs so far, by the way?
Yeah, I am. You know what? I've been the TV's been on, and I've been doing some World Championship stuff at the same time, trying to find rosters which are later this year because teams are having trouble getting guys to go and all that. But so usually I've got 2 computers going and a television going. So there's times where I've got 3 games going, but as expected and as we've come to learn, the first round is so exciting. You never know what's going to happen. And just when you think that one team has control of a series, it changes. I mean, certainly watching the Edmonton LA series for a number of reasons, my time in Edmonton, my relationship with Ken Holland, but also my relationship with Todd McClellan, who played for us when I was in Saskatoon, and I've kept in touch with both of those guys and that. So back to the Toronto days, you keep an eye on that series as well. So, but it's the first round of the NHL playoffs never disappoints.
Dennis, thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Guys, thank you very much. Great catching up. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to the old story. You asked me what time it is, and I'm going to tell you how to make a watch. So I know I rambled, but thank you very much for the opportunity. Really good seeing you guys. Take care of yourself.
So here we are. It's the spring, and hey, look who's in the studio. Brent McIntosh from the McIntosh Group at RE/MAX River City. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you, Brent?
Great. It's nice to have you in here. The spring is here, and things are getting busy.
Spring has sprung, and the market is on fire, Brent. Absolutely incredible for single-family houses, anyway, in Edmonton.
Really, and it's just kind of flipped the switch, huh?
I've never seen an increase in values this much in the last 30 days. Absolutely incredible. Edmonton's growth for the single family market. And I can't put a pinpoint on why, but it's pretty awesome if you own a house in Edmonton.
Now with the economy the way it is, and it's just kind of crazy right now with everything that's going on in the world, how is that affecting us?
That's a great question.
Do you want some time to think about it?
I do. Yeah. I don't know if you know, it's not like Edmonton's completely insulated from everything, but
yeah,
you know, if we're talking about the Russian war, for example, and the price of oil, that's nothing but a good thing for all of Alberta. So that's going to drive
the
house prices.
Unfortunate positive of
That's
a
right.
horrible negative.
Of course, every time you pay more at the gas pump, it's brutal as a family, but pretty good for the economy.
Yeah. So how do people get, how do people get involved? If they're thinking about it, now's the time to move, right?
Well, definitely. If you're thinking about selling, I can't think of a better time to give us a call. We're at 780-464-0075. And either myself or one of my team members would be happy to meet with you to talk about the sale of your property.
What about getting an evaluation done on their house if they're looking at selling?
Yeah, that's where we'll start. Completely complimentary. No obligation, and we'll sit down, we'll talk about the value, we'll show what's going on with the market, and we'll even give you, the seller, some tips on how to get the most out of their house.
Perfect. So once again, how do people get a hold of you?
780-464-0075 or on the web, macintoshgroup.ca.
And here you are in the sports thing. It's nice to have you here.
Well, I love watching you guys do the sports show.
Excellent. Thanks. So there you go. Enjoyed that today. Dennis Beyak catching up with us as he steps away from full-time NHL play-by-play. But yes, on his way to Helsinki for the World Hockey Championship. He'll be doing the secondary games for TSN. So he hasn't dropped it completely, but I'm glad to hear that he's got his golf game tuned up and ready to go by the time he hits Kelowna.
I'm just happy he didn't stay too long.
70. He looks great for 70.
Yes.
So, hey, let's touch on a couple of quick things. Let's talk about the two Alberta teams in the first round of the playoffs. And I don't know when people are going to download this podcast, but let's just talk generally. The Calgary Flames struggling with the Dallas Stars, and the Edmonton Oilers and the Los Angeles Kings battle back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I picked Edmonton in 7. I don't see that changing, but I'm not surprised. I'm a little surprised maybe at the fact that Dallas is giving Calgary a little more of a struggle, Robin.
Yeah, that's fair, Bull. I haven't seen a lot of Dallas, but I like Calgary. I think they're the better team, and I think they win. But you know what? When you look down some of the series that we've got going on now, as of when we're taping this, I mean, look at all the 2-2 series here, including the Oilers in LA. Everybody in this part of the country is looking for that Calgary-Edmonton Battle of Alberta.
And that's not a given.
There's nothing promised. And again, depending on when you download this, the Oilers have got to take on LA square up at 2 on Tuesday. And somebody comes out of that up 3-2. If it's not Edmonton, you're going to see some serious consternation in this town.
The Tampa Bay Lightning and the Toronto Maple Leafs are putting on quite a show as well. We got to give that series full marks because every time I think, oh, this is trouble for Toronto, and they come up and play great. And then I think, oh, this is trouble for Tampa. Then they all of a sudden step up and play great. This first round's been highly entertaining, not just the 3 series we've mentioned.
Yeah, and you know what? Out here at least, and I think probably some of it's because of the Austin Matthews Connor McDavid thing, the Hart discussion. I think I don't know how many people are hoping Toronto bites it in the first round against Tampa after all the talk that's gone on. But it's interesting to watch that series because I tell you what, there's going to be some big time consternation in Hogtown if the Maple Leafs can't get out of the first round again.
Same could be said for the Edmonton Oilers because the fan base here, it's you got to get into the second round or it's not going to be considered a successful season. And as for the Calgary Flames coming off the season that they had playing Sutter hockey, they're starting to realize that everybody plays Sutter hockey in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So it's fun. It's fun to watch. Hey, anything in passing before we disappear here?
We're disappearing. Oh my!
Well, we're
goodness.
disappearing for another week is what we're doing. Yeah.
Well, you know what? We'll have some things decided by the next time we get together, Bryn, in terms of the playoffs. And like you say, there's some, if you're talking the Oilers, if they fail to advance, Toronto, if they fail to advance, that's significant. Hey, and on a day, let's not forget, it won't be news by the time some people download this, Barry Trotz gets the sack in with the Islanders today.
Yeah. It's funny. We were just talking about coaches with the longest tenure lately, and Barry Trotz's name was the one that first came to my mind on the weekend, and here we get that big announcement today. Hey, before we go, just got to touch on a few things. You can get a hold of us via Twitter. Our handle's quite simple. It's @Outsiders2020. Also, make sure to tell your friends to like or subscribe our RSS feed on any of your favorite ear candy sites like Apple, Google, Spotify, Pocket Casts, etc. And we're also on YouTube. And as I mentioned earlier, I recorded the Road 55 studio in downtown Edmonton, just a hockey puck's throw away from Rogers Place. And Robin is at the Lucky Sam studio in Southwest Edmonton. Robin, that's it for today. I think we'll end the show a little differently. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready for it.
All right. Have a great week.
Little mama, baby.
Bye-bye, boys. Have fun storming the castle.
Road 55.